Here you go. Okay, so first maybe let's start with the announcements. So Canonical, like very generously volunteered to continue chairing the ROS2 security working group. So while Amazon will continue contributing with all the things you know about in terms of ASAN, TSAN, like we've been trying things around fuzzing, and the ROS Launch 2 sandboxing also is going to continue, as you will see after. We're gonna transfer the leadership of this working group to Canonical. So congrats and good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks, Thomas.
Do you know who will be officially the lead for the working group? Or it could be, I guess, multiple people too. I don't think we have a rule against that.
For now, it could just be me, Joe McManus, but we can put down. So maybe we might change it as it goes forward, as we staff up with a few more folks on the security side.
Okay. I think it's fairly flexible. I'm not super familiar with if there are any rules. There may be some rules I don't know about, but I think it's just, I think changing the chair is just as easy as sending a PR right now. Awesome. Cool. I think that's all for the announcements. Joe or anyone else on Canonical, anything you'd like to say, or I don't know, generally speaking, about the next step for the security working group, or what you plan to do on your side as a company for as part of your TSC commitment?
Well, I'm honored to get this award. I mean, we obviously want to continue the work you folks are doing, and want to continue the work everybody in this group is doing. We want to make the experience of security inside of ROS a little more in step with the security you get as if you were running standard Ubuntu. So all patching the regular cycle of new releases, etc. We want to make sure that's sort of in lockstep with our distribution in general. So and that'll help everybody, because obviously it's part of ROS. So that's kind of our goal right now, but I'm sure things will change as we get more involved and hear more from the community.
Awesome.
And more particularly interested in that Node IDL story, making, like Joe said, security easier for everybody.
Cool, awesome. That sounds very exciting. And yes, we've been talking a lot about the IDL story. It's I'm eager to see what's next for that too. Cool. So, in this case, I will just let you, Zach, talk a bit about the ROS Launch 2 sandboxing. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Oh, and I was not sharing my screen. Well, okay, I was not. Okay, so never mind. If you could share your screen in this case, I will. It'd be good.
Okay. I just posted in the chat the link to this repo. I believe it should be public by now. So what it is a plugin to launch that allows you to run ROS nodes inside a Docker container. Okay, so I'll start up an example of it.
While you start, maybe I can just add some details. So, because I don't know if you are all very familiar with ROS Launch 2, but ROS Launch 2 is written in Python, which has a nice side effect, which is that you can write plugin for it. You can write extensions very easily in a way which was not possible in ROS1, because extending an XML definition language is always fairly tricky, especially from the outside. But the good point is that in the ROS Launch 2 has a central repository called Launch, which is just a process manager, and it does not actually depend on ROS at all. And so there is a launch_ROS repository depending on Launch, which is actually implementing the ROS-related extensions of Launch. And what we're doing there is taking a dependency on this Launch repository and creating a new extension, which is, as Zach said, aimed at doing basically any kind of sandboxing when you run processes. And and the Docker policy is the first thing we are implementing for this project.
Okay. So here's an example launch script. So we have a new node container called sandbox node container, and I've attached a Docker policy which says for all the nodes defined inside the container, launch them inside a dashing desktop image downloaded from OSRF, and it's going to launch the listener node. So I can just run this script. And that will launch the Docker container. And then I can, to show that it actually works, I can launch the listener node in the same container. Hold on.
Do you have to
Do you need to background the task that you paused?
No, the container's already running.
You have to source the entry point. You see the entry point for the container is ./ROS or whatnot. You'll have to do that. So, okay. All right. Yeah, then you can type your thing.
Yeah, I was pretty sure it was already being sourced.
Yay.
And then there it goes. And
Talk to me about the sandbox node here. What is the difference? So the sandbox node container makes sense, but what's the difference between a sandbox node and just a normal node?
The sandbox node you see right here.
Yes.
It's just a description that specifies what to actually run inside the container. I couldn't reuse the actual node object because I need to interact with it slightly differently.
Okay.
And I think the node object actually is running code. Here, the sandbox node container runs the actual node.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you needed to get rid of all the logic actually starting the process because it's done at a higher level in the hierarchy. Cool. Makes
So
sense.
this basically ends up poking at the Docker container instead of actually running something inside the container. Is that really what you're saying? That was the worst way I could have possibly phrased that, but.
Okay, so the sandbox node container is responsible for launching the Docker container and also launching nodes within the container. And the information the information that provides which nodes to launch inside the container is provided by the sandbox node.
Okay, gotcha. So it just holds information rather as opposed to the node, which actually. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's pretty much just a plain old data type.
Yeah, so the reason why we're excited about that thing is because it opens a lot of possibilities for ROS2 users. So something we like about the current ROS Launch 2 approach is that launch does not depend on ROS, meaning that basically you could imagine running ROS2 application by installing launch and this launch ROS sandboxing or launch ROS sandbox through PIP, let's say on Windows, Mac, or whatever environment you want. And well, installing those two packages with PIP is enough to run any ROS2 application as long as it's containerized. So that kind of improves a bit the user story when you want to build an app, a robotic app. It's also interesting because it kills this notion of meta packages, which are like your ROS2 or ROS1 applications, which are basically depending on all all nodes, all packages containing the nodes you want to run in your launch files, meaning that now you have a single package which is basically depending on everything in ROS2. And depending how you're gonna build your workspace, you may have to build also everything from scratch. So that's fairly problematic. Obviously, something you can see if you can use, maybe just scroll down to the example that you wrote, Zach, is that maybe in the container launch, your example is that you were like this one would work, or exactly this one. So you can see that you can select a repository and a tag from your Docker instance. So basically, what you can do is you can also pin your container there, which is very important if you want to build a production robot. You really don't even want to let patch release in without at least some kind of vetting. So that's fairly interesting. And then it also kind of fix an issue, which is that for ROS2, there is a tension between developing ROS2 quickly and building stuff on top of master and having those features being into a stable release like 6 months or 1 year down the road. So you can kind of, on a node per node, choice, choose if you want to build, get a container which is maybe, forking stuff out of dashing, backporting, experimental features that you would not necessarily be comfortable bringing back to everyone. So that can unlock a lot of use cases, especially once we have better definition of how much cross release or cross compatibility you get between nodes. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. It's also is fairly useful to do E2E testing. So if you want to do, let's say, you have your node, you want to run an E2 or to write an E2E test for a node, and you don't want to necessarily add a bunch of dependencies to your package just because you want, I don't know, to test again robot state publisher, but you don't want to depend on it. Your E2E could just download the image on the fly. So you can pin the image again there, so that would make your E2E test less flaky too. And then you have a lot of things around like using or abusing Docker network capabilities. Like if you want to prove that your robot application is, can sustain increase in latency. So you have tools such as Pumbaa in Docker, which can be used to simulate network latency or package drops and so on. So you could very well imagine something which is, in its own small scale, akin to Kubernetes or Docker Compose for robots, especially you could imagine to replace the multi-machine like launch mechanism. So we commented on this PR yesterday. So you could have a cluster of, handled by Kubernetes on your robot and use this extension to provision this cluster with images running different nodes. And like something which is currently an open PR in this repo is also like passing random arbitrary flags to Docker. So what we're looking at through that is making sure that only one core can be used to run a particular node, or another node is gonna be allocated 2 cores and let's say like 500 megs of memory and so on and so on. Well, basically everything that you already know and love about doing cloud computing is nicely backported on your robot. And because it's still ROS Launch 2 at heart, well, you still have a possibility to opt out for hardware nodes. We had this discussion in the past where probably in robots, you really have 2 kind of nodes. You have your drivers, which are your sinks of your data flow. And those are probably cannot maybe run through Docker in a Docker instance because it needs to be tightly coupled with hardware interfaces. But everything in the middle, your motion planning, your perception pipeline, and stuff you want to get from like third-party actors on the internet, which may be malicious. You probably want some level of extra security for those like community nodes you pull into your production robot, and that's where this kind of sandboxing could come into play. So that's our vision with that. So we want to continue pushing this project, and we're gonna also demonstrate it at ROSCON. So if you attend to plan the security workshop, you're gonna have also a chance to see more about this work there.
This is good work, guys. It is very interesting. I will point out that there is a significant amount of overlap with like snaps, right? The single entry point, the fact that you can bundle the dependencies, you can ship it without ROS being installed. ROS is locked down and won't move out from under you, right? It's confined. Zach, have you played with those at all?
No, not yet. I'll add it to my to-do list.
It might be interesting for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, and actually one reason why that stuff is called and I forgot the order of those like names every time. Launch ROS Sandbox and not Launch ROS Docker, for instance, is because we don't want to make this design choice for users. We feel that there is a world where Docker is the right solution. There is a world where Snap is maybe the right solution. There is a world where you don't want anything. So another policy you've been working on is ROS.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. We also have a, well, it's not in as developed state, but it's called the user policy. It allows you to run all the nodes inside the sandbox as a specific user. So that gives you some of the benefits that servers have been gaining for like the past several years, where you run the individual program as a specific user, and that prevents the resources being shared with other programs ran as different users, and also, the nodes that are ran as a different user are unable to kill the nodes that they don't have the privilege to.
Yeah. Typical example is really the camera driver. You want that stuff to run, in the video group, for instance. I think it's a separate discussion whether or not you want that in a Docker or whatever, like form of sandboxing. But So to go back to your point, basically, I think that something we saw a lot, and maybe which is why ROS has been so successful, is that there is really no one size fits all when it comes to robots. So we plan to contribute that to the community. It's already Apache 2 open source, but we really want to engage the community on this repository because we feel that it's what we thought would be nice policies, but we're definitely looking into brainstorming ideas with all of the community really, and making sure that if anyone else wants to come, let's say Canonical wants to come and contribute a snap, policies, and that's why it's designed this way, basically.
Awesome. Yeah, looks great, guys.
That's great.
Thank you.
Cool. I think that's all on our side. Ruffin, do you want to give us your thoughts about like the DDS participants mapping discussion?
So for those that aren't initiated in the discussion, I've been trying to find the discourse thread. You guys remember where it was? I found the design PR. So whoever's sharing their screen, you can go to ROS2 design poll 250 and maybe pull that up.
250, okay.
So reconsider node to participant mapping. And I think this was brought out from a performance perspective on where basically
I just pasted in the forum, by the way. Sorry, Ruffin.
Awesome.
Oh, thanks.
So I think the current design pattern is that you have one DDS participant per ROS node. And even if you start composing multiple nodes like you had in like ROS1 where we had nodelets, now that's not necessarily a thing in ROS2. You can be more agnostic in how you program your nodes, whether you compose them later at runtime. But should you compose them at runtime, they're still going to have one participant per node. And that adds a lot of overhead in both in discovery and for CPU cycles. And this is having sort of a demonstrous effect in trying to retain the same performance characteristics. One area I think I've seen the nodes and participant pattern go too far is like in the navigation 2 stack. So for example, if you take a look at the ROS-SWG, this security working group on GitHub and the Turtlebot demo. So someone can paste that as well. If you look at the policies and then the TB3 gazebo policy.xml, see, can someone paste that? I'm on my phone. So if you look at that policy document, it's so long because there's a lot of topics, that's okay, but there's a lot of duplications because the navigation stack has gone pretty far and just like splitting just about everything into a node. Even so, they're like dynamic nodes. So we had to use the namespace prefixing feature where, and some random navigation node appends itself a a number to its node name, and then anyway, I think that's part of the deal that's kind of been hitting us in terms of performance. And moving back to the pull request for design for 250, the idea is to maybe introduce a sort of a higher level concept of context, where if you choose to bundle nodes into a single process, then maybe they all inherit the same DDS participant, and that would be mapped to in the ROS ecosystem as a context. And then that would kind of generalize to other transports later on. And that has widespread repercussions in the rest of the RMW and RCL infrastructures. And so one of the areas that we're concerned about in security or in SROS is retaining the same levels of like principal of least privilege and minimum policy requirements. So we're thinking of ways of extending the current policy format. For those that maybe aren't familiar, I encourage you to take a look at the ROS2 design doc for SROS security and then the SROS policy. So if you just go to the ROS2 design website and Control F security, you'll find that. And so that defines the access control policy and its schema as it's currently implemented. One of the things I've been thinking about recently is extending the schema to transparently expose these ideas of concepts to the policy author. And so I've been thinking of, if you guys have use cases, I think it'd be nice if we kind of collect those to kind of get more examples of how you might do this. But one thing I have right now is like, let's say you have a traditional robotic pipeline. You'll have like a mapping pipeline, a tracking pipeline, a navigation pipeline, and maybe more higher level pipelines like control and stuff like that. But like in the mapping pipeline, you'll have maybe like your front and rear lidars, and you'll have the driver nodes for those lidars, and then they'll be publishing to the same like scan topic, and then you'll have the SLAM algorithm that's going to be subscribed to that, and then maybe you want to compose those drivers and the SLAM node into one context, and then you'll have the tracking context, which might have two camera drivers left and right. You'll have like a stereo processor, which is like merging that into a disparity map or a point cloud, and then you'll have a detection algorithm that's like looking for obstacles. All right, so that's going to be composed into one context. And then you might have like a navigation stack, which is then taking both the map from the navigation stack, the point cloud obstacles from the obstacle detection stack, and then feeding that into the controller to generate trajectories. And so that's your navigation context. And then the thing that I'm doing right now is I'm working on different methods of static analysis and lattice-based information control flow, or flow control, where if the user were to make these compromises and putting multiple profiles into the same context, they can be assured that they aren't expanding the information flow footprint that a normally unprivileged node would have gained by being introduced into the same context. Because eventually these contexts are all going to map to one DDS policy governance and permission file. So it's basically we're merging all these profiles to accommodate the bundling of multiple nodes in the same context. So that's been what I've been working on right now, but it'd be nice if we maybe had more use cases to make sure that we're designing something that's more friendly to this paradigm.
from a naive point of view, would it not, looking at the documentation for node composition and the way this works, I'm worried that someone's going to come away from that saying, oh, well, then obviously I need to compose all of my nodes into the same context, at which point it like this will be the maximum performance, you know what I mean? And then they lose so many benefits, security included. The lattice you were talking about, the logic is it's going to be a warning, right? Telling them that it's not going to be like a nope, can't do this, but it'll be this may not be the way you want to put these things together.
Yeah. So one of the checks I wanted to make is like, let's say for the tracking algorithm. So you have your camera drivers, you have your stereo processor, and you have your detection algorithm. So if you merge those into the same context, the camera drivers are going to be able to publish to whatever maybe the detection topic. They're going to be able to publish point clouds. But given that the camera was used to derive the point clouds, maybe that's a compromise you're okay with because they could influence point clouds indirectly anyway. Whereas if you merged something like the controller with the tracking pipeline, well then now the cameras are able to set twists or control velocities, and that's a bit too far-fetched. And so that's something that warn you, saying that hey, currently given the lattice structure you've defined, this is in violation of the compromise of information flow you were trying to make.
Interesting.
Yes.
I'm excited to see that algorithm. I mean, it all sort of depends on your perspective, right? At some point, everything affects everything. It'll be interesting to see how you. Go ahead.
I've been looking at the related work. This information flow control theory dates back to like 1976.
That's awesome.
I've been looking at all this related work to try and make sure that. The other thing is like our paradigm, the way we manage data is a lot different than like traditional computer science, where like, you have a storage of memory and then you read and write into this memory. Where here we're like reading right into a bus, into a data stream, and it's just a little bit different. And the life cycle of this data. That's all I had for now. Do people have other questions on?
Jacob, are you still around? Just as what I found interesting with what Ruffin was talking about was the idea that using node composition, you can come up with a really poorly structured system, right? Are you guys talking about tools for guiding them towards properly structuring a set of launch files, or like, I don't know, it's hard to define, but
yeah, I haven't been a part of any discussions regarding that. I'm sure I know there's an article open about the intra-process communication. I don't know if there's any, I haven't gone through the design doc yet, but I don't know if they've considered those kinds of questions there.
And I will play a bit, devil's advocate there, but something which is going to be a real challenge, is that most robotics applications are really a single pipeline, in the sense that if any node break, then you basically catastrophically fail, or at least you cannot realize the task you were assigned to. And there will always be
splitting out to separate processes maybe isn't the most useful thing.
I mean, that's the thing, right? And it always goes back to the thing, which is like, you don't have a one-size-fits-all. Obviously, if you're a self-driving car, you you want, at least your fallback mechanism to live into a different process, because that's your fallback, right? But on the opposite side, if you think about, I don't know, an AIBO or a small robotic toy, well, then there is very little incentive to not be, like a single process running as root with PID1, because, well, you probably, have something like 50 megs of RAM anyway. And on top of that, well, even if you malfunction, what you really want to do is to reboot as fast as possible so that users won't realize that you just crashed. And then what you want is to also maybe not have to pay with the additional dependency of ROS launch, which I think, is always a bit underestimated, which is I always found incredibly hard to have a non-flaky ROS launch, because due to the way that ROS launch is working, and hopefully our life cycle is going to help with that, but it's a long shot. Well, your flow of data is basically, need to start from somewhere, and you have a transition state where all of your topics value are like flaky and stable and don't really mean anything, and you converge toward a stable mode where you can start acting. And if you are a single process, then all of this scheduling process really just disappear. So just, FYI, I think that there will be different kind of users, and it's important to have security in mind, but I think that for a lot of use cases, it's hard to go to people and advocate for something which is more than a single process,
Yeah, I think a common use case might be, you want your robot to be secure from, I guess, cross-talking with other robots or, external actors, versus between the processes on your system.
Yeah. Yeah, and something, I don't know if it was you, Rafin, or Michael, I don't know, someone in the previous meetings were also mentioning the fact that as a robot vendor, what you really want from SROS is to protect your private API.
Right.
Oh yeah. So you have like a two-tier system. So maybe for your autonomous vehicle, you'd have the manufacturer drive-by-wire system, and then you might have the multimedia system so that, third-party vendors can interface with the vehicle, like set waypoints and stuff like that, but they can't necessarily control like wheel velocities and things like that.
Yeah, so...
Hey, Rafin, do you mind if I ask you a question going back to the performance? You said you've noticed the performance implications yourselves when you have too many participants. So I was just wondering, was there ever any analysis done whether there's performance overhead because of the DDS design, or whether it's DDS implementation?
So if we discussed a little bit of this back in another related meeting. There's a blog post that I think kind of nicely we're discussing this on Discourse. There's a navigation to blog post 2 or something on Discourse. Let's look Discourse. Yeah, so I just kind of posted the blog post to ROS2 dashing navigation. And so it was Rutu from
I just pasted it in.
Robotic. Yeah. And if you look at this post, he kind of encounters the similar things that I had, where you start your navigation stack and it kind of hangs because there's just an flood of discovery information, and then different vendors, DDS vendors, kind of perform differently. either because they have different defaults or because the implementation. Looks like Jamie from Ipsima has also commented on it. I kind of poked Jamie saying, "Hey, take a look at our QoS issue with security. If you want a reproducible example." So, what the discovery overhead has been an issue in DDS for since it started. But that's not because I think it's DDS. It's just like it's an inherent problem of distributed system. You need some way of like announcing yourself and disseminating the information of your existence. It's gone so far where like some of the literature I've seen and the research is like alternative schemes for encoding discovery information using Bloom filters. So like using probabilistic data structures to do sparser encoding of discovery information to kind of limit the overhead. But I think the smartest strategy is just being more precise on like in regards to both your application and your use cases. Like, is this node going to be online for a long amount of time? Is it on a wireless network or is it wired? And then adjusting your QoS properties for your discovery information accordingly. That being said, yeah. I think the context might help alleviate that. Go ahead.
What we heard on our side is that, well, for sure the discovery time is an issue, because if you look at the blog post, having like to wait a couple minutes to have, something which is really a simple app, like level of complexity is obviously not acceptable. There is another thing that we saw on our side, which is that at least for fast RTPS, and I think for the other two implementations, like for OpenSplice and RTI Connect, the initial memory consumption when you have multiple processes is also not acceptable. So due to the fact that when you have an empty ROS2 node, you already come with a parameter server, which like already plumbed a lot of things through DDS. And if I quote from memory, but I think that we had something like a couple gigs of virtual memory allocated at startup for, like an empty ROS2 node not doing anything. So that's a real issue.
A couple gigs?
Yeah, a couple gigs, yeah. So that's the problem we're having right now. I'm going to give you the numbers so that you don't have to trust me. So it's an analysis which has been done by iRobot. So it's Crystal, but I don't believe that it's been improving that much, unfortunately. And that's also why, so you saw some activity around Cyclone DDS, which is better, at least on this axis. But then again, it seems to be a trade-off between implementing the spec completely versus allocating or not a lot of memory. So it's we have work to do, and I'm going to try to memory usage. Here we go. If I don't know if I can find that quickly.
Aside from security, I think a nice design tool might be to help users highlight hide spots in their pipeline. So let's say you're just starting out and you don't know what you need or need not to do. So you run everything as its own node, and then you kind of monitor the system and like where there's high latency in between two topics, or there's a lot of bandwidth between these two topics, or maybe not in topics, but there's like two particular nodes, and then that kind of guides your decision making. Or maybe it does it automatically, and like here I'm going to schedule instead of scheduling time, I'm going to schedule your resources, and I'm going to be all Kubernetes for you and try and maximize your system utilization.
And that'd be interesting on ROS 1 as well, especially with the multi-machine stuff, where if you have 2 subscribers on machine B subscribing to the same topic on node A, and you end up publishing them essentially twice, detecting those types of things.
Yeah.
Where a republisher would, just little things like that.
Okay, and just FYI, I also pasted the link directly to the analysis they did for memory and CPU consumption.
Great, thank you.
Are these pastes in the Prime link, or are they on somewhere permanent?
Sorry, you were
they're in Chime. Is there any chance you could put them in the notes, Thomas?
Oh yeah, let me just do that too.
Also, for those uninitiated, we also have a Matrix hybrid IRC channel that you guys can join. We're actually a community, Matrix community. Kyle, maybe you want to paste that as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that to the doc because we should definitely have a link. To that.
Yeah, that's probably best. Yeah, thank you.
If you link to the community, it'll also include all of the separate threads. So maybe don't just paste the thread. The community's good.
Oh yeah, can you send me the link directly? Just trying to find it now, but maybe you can get it faster than me. There we go. All right. Okay, here is what I got. Let me know if it's what you wanted. I think that's what we want to put as an entry point.
Is that to the ROS.org security group, or is it to the community, or is it to one of the actual rooms that we have?
So this one is to the security working group room, but I guess you get
the security. So there's ROS.org security. So
I can't figure out how to get a link to that though.
Yeah.
You just go to your community, your list of, or I guess you haven't actually subscribed to the community. All right. I pasted it in the.
Maybe that would explain it.
All right. So add that to the doc. That is so when you click on that link, that shows all the rooms in this community. So if we add more, then we won't have to paste it everywhere.
Okay.
I have to drop. It's I got another meeting right now. But thanks everybody for being on the call, and we have to ping some folks with questions. Maybe we'll take over that doc. I'm going to share it, or we'll just host it on ours or whatever, or something. But we might have some questions before the next meeting.
Yep. Yeah, we can take those offline. Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. So I just pasted in a link to the community.
Oh, and we're going to get kicked out too. So sorry guys, we're gonna need to cut short on this one. Can you ping me on Riot all the other things that we need to do for transferring the ownership, and we can probably take it from there. I'm not gonna kill the meeting room so that you can all continue discussing it if you'd like to.
No problem. I'll ping you there.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys.